It is the most frustrating and unfortunate circumstance of all to have such a lazy wife. Lazy women during their bachelorette years are the loudest and demanding ones to their younger siblings and most stubborn to their parents. They make up every reason not to do their chores. But these same women are the most diligent women you will ever meet when there are men around. They'll take on 10 different tasks, and inside, you're smiling to yourself thinking you have a good catch. "That was my wife," he said. Welcome to Human Heart Stories. My name is Julie, and today I'll be telling a story called "A Lazy Wife is a Hardship Life." Thank you to this man for sharing your story. Please listen with me, help like this video, and subscribe to this channel for more stories. And so he said, "I was accompanying my uncle with his work from town to town. I was young and ready to meet girls, so I made sure to always dress nice and look sharp. My uncle and I were traveling far from home one time, and so we spent a night at a relative's in the countryside. This house was right by the river, where you would see people walking by every day with their buckets of water. There was a girl I noticed walking by with her bucket, maybe early 20s. She looked at me, then quickly looked away. I watched her walk away, and my interest grew. I stayed put where I was to see if she would come back out of her house to the river. And then there she was again, walking past me with her hourglass figure. Wow, she looked so beautiful. She got more water to fill her buckets, working fast and diligently, and would walk right past in front of me each time, only 5 feet from me. I thought to myself, she would make a good wife. Her younger siblings are sitting around doing nothing while she's doing all the work." It was her 4th time walking past me when I couldn't hold it in any much longer. I finally said to her, "Hello, miss. You're working so hard, aren't you?" She smiled brightly at me and said, "Oh, not working hard at all." I asked, "Are you single? Do you have a boyfriend?" She said, "If I had a boyfriend, he would be here helping me, wouldn't he?" My heart jumped in joy. I asked to join her, and she obliged. We went down to the river, and our conversation continued. I confirmed if she lived in the house I saw her come out of, and she said yes. So I told her I would stop by later to talk to her some more. I stopped by her house a bit later. She was courteous and invited me inside for dinner. I politely declined, but I waited outside. Outdoors, I could see her in the kitchen. She was working hard at prepping dinner for the family, cleaning the pots and pans and washing her vegetables quickly. Then you could hear her chop chop away. I was impressed. And then you could hear her speaking gently to the younger kids. "Sweeties, come wash your hands clean. It's time for dinner. Then almost time for bed, 'cause we have to get up early tomorrow to go to the garden. Mom, the table's all set. Come eat." Her words were so kind and gentle. She ate so delicately, and waited patiently for the elders to finish eating before she cleaned the table, and then all the dishes. Her little sister came up and volunteered to help, but she said, "It's okay, darling. It's late, and you should go to bed now." As I watched her, I was falling for her. My mom would love her. I was so happy and only worried that other men might steal her from me. I thought to myself, this country girl is much more wife material than the girls in the city. When I knew she was done with her chores, I knocked on the door again, and she invited me inside. She grabbed stools for us to sit by the fire and sat right next to me. I said to her, "So much chores to do by yourself, isn't it?" She said, "Oh, it's nothing. I don't want to ask the little ones, so it's not a big deal." As we chat, our conversations flowed, and my heart was beating fast for her. As the night wore on, I grabbed her hand to hold. Then soon, I had my hand on her leg. She said, "Only because it's you, and I like you too much. You can't tell anyone or I would die from shame, and you would have to marry me." This was the woman I wanted to marry. I just liked her too much, and she felt like the one. That night, I stayed as late as I could with her. The next day, I told my uncle about her, that I wanted to marry this girl. We had just met, but I didn't want to regret losing her, especially living in a different town. Uncle said, "Okay, if you want to marry her, then marry her." We were far from home, so he said if I didn't want to wait, then he could help me marry her before we left their town. We were staying one more day. I saw her carrying water again. She dressed even nicer today and looked more beautiful than yesterday. I chased her down to the river. I told her, "Do you want to marry me tonight?" She said, "Are you joking with me?" "No, I'm not." I told her my uncle and I were leaving early in the morning and she could leave with us. Then we can arrange the wedding later. We agreed to the plan. Later, I went to her house again. I could hear her speaking in the same gentle tone to her younger siblings. I confirmed our plan for the morning. That night, I could barely sleep. The next morning, before dawn, I picked her up at her house. We waited for my uncle in a nearby town, and when he joined us, we were all on our way home. My heart was jumping in joy. During the first few days, my wife worked hard around the house. She cooked and cleaned all day. My mom told her not to worry about cleaning and everything, but she did anyway. People came to visit and were happy I found such a good wife. Soon it was our wedding day. I met many of her family members, and then I overheard some old ladies whispering, "Oh my goodness, she's such a lazy girl. He likely doesn't know her, that's why he married her. She only puts on a show in front of the boys. Afterwards, all she does is yell and scream at her younger siblings to do her chores. If she changes, then things might be okay. But if she doesn't change, I'm afraid they might not even last 3 days. We will see." When I heard the gossips, it made me confused and worried. I thought, why would they say such a thing? So then I quickly brushed it off as I had seen her do her chores with my own eyes. Later on, the men were getting more drunk but still drinking heavy, so I excused myself to use the restroom. I went into the backyard for a breath of fresh air instead. Then all of a sudden, I heard a woman's voice yelling at the top of her lungs coming from the back of the house. I listened closer, and it was my wife's voice. I went inside to see what was going on. She was yelling and pointing her fingers at her younger siblings. She demanded one to sweep the floors, another to wash the dishes, and then another to bring her water. As soon as she saw me, though, she calmed a bit down. I said, "What's going on? Why are you shouting so much?" She said, "Oh, it's nothing much. It's just that the younger ones here are slow and lazy and not getting things done to my satisfaction. I'm not feeling too well today, so I just had them do a few things for me." I said, "Well, don't yell so loud, okay? Just ask nicely." She said, "Me? Oh, I didn't yell too loud." I didn't think too much about the incident. I thought because they were her younger siblings, she is just comfortable around them. Back home, as she started her new life with me, she was back to being the diligent person I knew. Before I knew it, she was busy washing pots and pans and didn't allow my mom to do any of the work. She was energetic and got chores done quickly and thoroughly. Our garden was a distance from our house, so we would have to get up early before sunrise and sometimes spend a few days at our garden house. She began having a difficult time getting up early, so I would wake her up. When she heard me, she said, "I'm so exhausted. Can I sleep a little longer?" I felt bad and thought she must just be tired from all the work she's done. But the next day, I woke her up again, and she said the same thing again. But then I loved her and thought I should let her rest. Everyone gets tired at times. So I left her alone. I kept myself busy, doing some yard work, and even made lunch. When I came back to check on her, she was still sleeping like a baby. I gently woke her up. "Wake up, dear. I already did some chores around the house and made lunch too, and you're still sleeping. It's getting late and time for us to go to the garden." She awoke and said, "I'm so tired. Why don't you set the table? I'll go wash my face, and then we eat lunch." So then I said, "Okay." I set food on the table and came to woke her up again. She got up slowly, and even then, took several minutes to sit on the edge of the bed with her face resting on her hand. Then finally got up slowly to wash her face and brush her teeth. By the time she was done, food was cold. And she still took her time, one spoonful at a time. I then left for the garden first, and by the time she finally showed up, I had already finished gardening a couple rows. I said, "What took you so long?" She responded, "Oh, I was still cleaning the dishes and the house, that's why." But I could tell her attitude had changed a bit. One morning, I went out hunting. I woke her and told her to have breakfast ready for me, and then after breakfast, we'll head back to the garden. She said okay. So that morning, I actually took my time, and so I thought to myself, by now she probably ate lunch already and must be at the garden. But when I got back, the door was wide open. I wondered where my wife could be. When I looked in our room, my wife was sleeping, snoring loudly. In a loud tone of voice, I said, "My goodness, why are you still sleeping? I told you to get up when I woke you." She rubbed her eyes. "Oh, It seems like you had just left. What time is it? I said, It's 9 o'clock. Hurry, get up. We have a lot of work to do. At this rate, we won't get things done. She was irritated and argued back. Calm down. There's not that much to do at the garden. Stop yelling at me. My body's just tired. I needed rest. She got mad at me. She didn't even eat with me during our lunch break. I was upset at her earlier, but now she was even more upset at me. So then I spent all day coaxing her and being sweet to her. From there on, she started getting mad at the smallest things. And she knew me enough by now that it encouraged her to stay mad until I gave in and made her happy again. Shortly, she started asking me to make lunch for the family. The days when she did cook, it was always after she had slept in well. And then she would ask me to help her prep everything. Bring her the pot, bring her the water, bring her more wood. Oh my goodness. At the garden, she complained about everything. If it was too bright, she would run and find shade for a little while. If it started raining, she would run to the garden house for shelter. She complained about how big our garden was. Why do you have to have such a huge garden? The work will never be done. I told her, things will get done. If you're tired, then get some rest. As soon as she heard that, she took a break every few minutes, standing in place, looking at the sky, watching birds fly, commenting on this bird and that bird and squirrels in the tree. Oh. Then one day, I asked her, Why are you being like this? Are you expecting? She just said, I don't know. Later that same evening, she said, I haven't been menstruating, and every time I smell food, it makes me want to puke. So then I thought she must be pregnant. I told her not to do any heavy duty chores and to get enough rest. I told my mom about the news. Mom, my wife is pregnant, so she won't be doing as much chores around the house. Mom said, Okay, that is fine. If she's expecting, she should definitely rest more. Then my wife took advantage. She overslept every day, and I even had to bring food to the bedroom for her. But she ate very well. I told her to take care of minor duties around the house while I left for the garden. She said, Oh, if I wasn't so tired like this, I would go with you. I hate staying home like this all day. As soon as I left, she was out visiting the neighbors. Then she would come home and eat, leaving dirty plates in the sink. When I got home, I heard her making crying sounds, like she was ill. As I got nearer to her, she got louder. I said, What's wrong, honey? She said, It's 'cause I was feeling nauseated today. I ate a little bit and threw them all back out. I feel so weak and hungry. So I made her some fresh soup. Whatever she craved, I made it or bought it for her. My wife continued with this behavior for a good 2 months. I did all her laundry, cooked, and cleaned for her. Her exaggerated symptoms made me suspicious. I started asking other friends about their wives' pregnancies, if it was like my wife's. Then I had neighbors also tell me that they see my wife walking around the neighborhood all day, visiting friends here and there. She didn't act like a pregnant woman then. So I started doubting my wife. I touched her stomach and said, You should be 3 to 4 months by now. How come I don't feel a bump? She said, Oh, that's too early. You don't see it until at least 6 months. One day, When I returned from the garden, after spending several days there, my little siblings told me my wife had been ill. She's been crying from the bedroom. I went straight to the room to check on her, and she said, "You've been gone so long, and I almost died." I said, "Why? What happened?" She cried, "Oh my gosh, I had a miscarriage. The kids were away at school, so I had to do all the chores by myself. I was climbing a fence and then fell over and injured myself. I had such painful stomach contractions and then started bleeding, and that's when I miscarried. I am just feeling better today." I felt bad for her and I was sad, so I took care of her for the next 5 to 6 days. But I wondered where her dirty, soiled laundry was, as she had bled so much. So I said, "Where are the soiled clothes?" She said, "I washed them already." But then earlier, she had told me she was in pain and slept in bed the whole time. I was starting to doubt her story. But I didn't want to confront her about her lying, especially being she gets mad at everything. Afterwards, her laziness started appearing more and more. It was getting harder for her to hide. Each time my parents were not around, she would ask me to do everything for her. She grew comfortable with my younger siblings too, and started asking them to do her favors. As time went by, my mom started liking her less. Then one day, my wife really became pregnant, but her pregnancy symptoms were different from the first time. She was still tired, but at least she looked it, and then I could see her belly growing at just 2 months. After our baby was born, she demanded me to do everything for the baby. When the baby pooped, she called for me. When baby peed, she called for me. When baby cried in the middle of the night, she woke me up to take care of the baby. But in the morning, when I would try to wake her up, she would say, "I'm too tired. I was up all night from the baby's cries." She used the baby as an excuse for everything, saying the baby only wanted her, or that the baby was sick, so she had to stay home to take care of baby. But as soon as I returned from the garden, she threw the baby to me, saying she was exhausted from watching baby all day. As time went on, I got sick and tired of her. We got into more arguments, and I always had to give in to her or she stayed mad. When our baby turned 2, we finally moved out on our own. Her attitude and laziness got worse. We had our second child, and I would spend days by myself at the garden while she stayed home with the kids. When I returned, my kids were filthy, dirty, and the house was a complete mess, with pots and pans and dirty plates all over. By now, she barely kept up with her appearance. Her hair was equally messy, going for days without showering. Pots and pans started attracting flies. She would make a large amount of food, enough to last her a few days, because she was too lazy to cook every day. I cleaned up her mess, and when I yelled at her, she would only get angry and yell back. At nighttime, I took care of mostly the kids while my wife slept. When they were sick, my wife threw them at me and told me to take care of them. My mom complained about my wife to me. "Your wife is so lazy, does not take care of the kids. The kids will come over by themselves to the house when they're hungry. And then she only visits during lunchtime, and as soon as we're done cooking, she invites herself to eat with us." I started feeling like my life was going nowhere. There was no progress. My wife had no motivation to help me build our life, to bring in more income. We were struggling hard. I ran into my uncle. I told him I was stressed about my marriage. My uncle said, "Son, I didn't want to tell you then, but when I was working out your marriage details in their town, one of her relatives said to me, 'Your nephew is marrying so and so's daughter? Oh, she is very lazy and only yells at her siblings to do everything for her. Don't fall for her beauty. The reason she's beautiful is because she spends all day in front of the mirror.'" My uncle pitied me. By the time we had our third kid, she was still the same person, if not worse. My friends and relatives lost respect for me. She was always the first in line to eat at their houses, but never volunteered to help cook or clean. I was getting more sick and tired of cooking and cleaning up after her, especially after a long day at the garden. I no longer had patience, so then our arguments grew worse. Finally, I had to divorce her, but she told her entire family she was the one working hard while I did nothing. Her family knew her well enough and didn't side with her. All the kids stayed with me. So that was my first wife. I did eventually remarry. My new wife is at least normal. When she's tired, she's tired. But when it's time to work and get things done, she gets things done. I finally feel like my life is going somewhere. Each time I think about my first wife, I get a strong reaction like I'm about to vomit. I am so happy where I'm at now. This story ends here. Thank you for listening to Human Heart Stories. Please help like this video and subscribe to this channel for more stories.